China wants 4 million Teslas a year starting ASAP is our story for today. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If you're a first-time viewer, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also wanted to note that we have a Patreon support area. And for those of you who join us in that space, I think you'll find a large amount of information that's helpful in your trading and investment process that you do not get on the main channel, including those that are at the highest level kind of get a daily trade blast 5 days a week regarding better process. At any rate, today's talk is a bit unusual. I say that because we typically try to come to a great conclusion at the end of our shows, and today won't be one of those days, and you'll see why. So basically what we do is at least once a month, if not twice, we try to go to China to see if there are any new developments that are worth noting, and then work on how we blend that into the show and looking at the implications of it. The latest is, you'll notice the thumbnail we chose is the Model Y that's in test production currently in the China facility. And we believe that that Model Y will start production at scale at least sometime in the next 90 days. But I think it's between 30 and 60 days away from scale production because there's a huge backlog of people who want to purchase that vehicle. So there's an interesting concept. There's an Indian concept that suggests that there was 5 blind men, each of whom wanted to describe an elephant, and they were each holding a different part of the elephant and trying to describe it. And each of them knew that their description was perfect. And I bring this up today because what I wanted to do is take a look at the China situation from Tesla in several different angles, but they theoretically should go together, kind of don't, but they kind of do. So as I get into it, you'll see. So the first thing I wanted to review was that I had an encounter with a PhD from University of Purdue or Purdue University in Indiana, who's from China, and he lives here in the Washington, D.C. area. And we had an interesting conversation about 2.5 years ago. What he said to me was, look, Greg, the Chinese government is very focused on anything and everything they do. So the problem they're having is they've made pollution a top priority of things that they're going to address over the next 5 or 6 years. And there are a lot of methods that they have in mind to do it. One method is to make a big push into EVs. And to that end, they've actually helped facilitate the opening of at least 2 EV manufacturers in every major city in China. And it's created this chaos where you have things like different charging ports. Many of the vehicles tend to have about the same range. They're all trying to copy Tesla. And so that effort hasn't worked that great while they've been watching Tesla build its infrastructure of superchargers and other solutions for people that own the cars at the high end. And so don't be surprised to see that what their goal is, when they have goals, they have the money to get it done, and they will get after it in ways that do not happen in sort of first world countries like the United States. So I was kind of fascinated when he made this statement because at the time, the Chinese government had decided to protect the domestic new manufacturers from companies like Tesla by having high tariffs on Teslas, et cetera, resulting in very high prices. But despite the high prices, well-heeled consumers were purchasing them. So as we've discussed on numerous occasions, there's a large number of techniques that the Chinese have switched to in order to get where their goal is. And their stated goal is that they want 25% of all vehicles in China in 2.5 years from now to be EVs. And so if you break down the numbers, China does maybe 24 million cars a year. Of that, let's say half of them are sort of sub $20,000 vehicles for very, to fit the inexpensive portion of the population. China's middle class is actually greater than the population of the United States. So there's a large base of customers that want to purchase there. So what's happened is that, as you know, China, instead of giving the current factory location in Shanghai to NIO, they gave it to Tesla instead, or leased it to Tesla. And as I was preparing for this show, I decided to sort of look over what was going on at that factory with the numerous aerial cameras that people are running over that plant. And if you look at the video, and I'm going to place it as the video that's showing during parts of this show, you'll notice that some of the concerns that are being articulated by manufacturers or journalists in the United States really don't apply to China. Number one, they're not worried about sales. Number two, the way things are being built there, that's 20, 30, 50-year construction that they're doing in terms of the size of the facility and intricacy. Another data point is that currently the China facility is at least double the size of Fremont, but I wouldn't be surprised if the square footage in the buildings is triple Fremont size already. And so it's very clear that the 250,000 vehicles per year that's being discussed is way low. The number that was thrown out was the fact that they're at 10,000 vehicles a week currently by the head of the facility in June. And then if we see the follow-through this of vehicles sold, clearly Elon's goal of 500,000 vehicles a year will be eclipsed rather dramatically. And I wonder if we couldn't even get past that number just in China if we start production of the Model Y in the time frame I've discussed. So the issue that comes up is, in essence, China wants 5 million vehicles to be EVs in 2.5 years. Tesla is the real and best and only solution right now. And as they sort of grow the types of vehicles available, I believe it's pretty obvious that we're going to see huge quantities of Teslas sold. And if you think it through, 4 million vehicles 2.5 years from now, they probably need at least one, if not two more factories in China to get that done. And at that level, the discussion of Tesla being a $1 trillion company, because I haven't even discussed what Tesla will do in other parts of the world. So in theory, they'll have similar numbers, maybe 2 or 3 million for the rest of the world available. And so it's very clear that there's a bright future for the company. So I kind of have some mental difficulties with this process because, as you know, the company has sort of given out certain numbers, and then journalists have given out other numbers, and then there's counts the number of vehicles that have been registered. There are all these numbers that are flying around. But after you look at the facility, how big it is, and what the capabilities are, I think it's pretty clear. Kind of the one argument against what I've stated is the fact that they're kind of, in theory, trying to combine Fremont and what's going on in Reno into one building. And so in theory, you could theoretically have a bigger facility simply because you're trying to consolidate as much under one roof as possible is one of the conversations that's being had by Tesla currently. And so, the plan that Elon also talked about was trying to place perhaps as many as 5 gigafactories in China, each in different parts of the country. That way they can more easily service sort of local. One of the phenomenons of China is that individual cities or provinces have sort of their ruling governments, and they tend to have a bias towards aiding local manufacturing. So that might be a good reason why we might not see a huge or all of it coming just from Shanghai. Again, the photo that we presented to you for the Model Y suggests that it is in test phase right now. The test phase of the Model 3 into production was under 60 days, I think 90 days tops. So the test last year started in September, and scale production, I guess in real numbers, wasn't until Christmas. But because we already have the Model 3 production rolling, that's why I think somewhere in that October, November timeframe is when we're actually going to see Ys coming out in large numbers, and has been shared by a lot of people because of the cost of land and the size of families in China. It's a lot more efficient to do larger unit counts or larger vehicles than smaller vehicles in terms of serving that marketplace better. There's some weird questions here that come to understanding, and one is that why would China make a foreign company rich like that? Elon has said that all inputs will come from domestic production by the end of the year, which means that China gets all the jobs, and all the domestic production reinforces that. So if they get all the jobs and all the production input jobs, no brainer. So in essence, the Chinese government seems to have an attitude that if we're getting a win-win out of it, we don't mind money going to other entities. And obviously the win here is, number one, they actually get all the jobs associated with the construction of the factory and its production. They get the benefit of the reduction in pollution, and therefore few people dying from that as they're able to cut pollution, and they've already achieved. Last time I checked from the engineer I told you, he said they had a 15% cut in pollution in China as a result of the EV switch. And as these numbers of Teslas keep pumping out, I believe they're going to be moving that needle a great deal. The other thing is that China has a real aggressive effort going where they don't mind spending money because they're getting it back in taxes. They're getting it back in a lot of different ways. So to dig in their bank and come up with ways to make it worth Tesla's while to be in China seems to be not an issue. The next item I wanted to review in terms of the China process is that it was expected by many people, particularly domestic U.S. and European manufacturers, that the rules that China had relative to EVs would be relaxed during COVID, and that hasn't occurred. Key rules that we've reviewed in the past is the fact that you can instantly get a license to purchase an EV and put it on the road, but it can take as long as 5 years to get permission for a new internal combustion engine vehicle. There are also taxes, fees, and registration fees that are non-existent for electric versus very high for the existing ICE vehicles. So in essence, the focus has not changed. In general, the idea here is that a focused China will make Tesla very wealthy, and we're seeing sort of that play out here. The final data point I wanted to throw out is that BYD just came out with earnings, and they announced that they were able to use rapidly put together mask business to elevate profits, despite the fact that their EV sales and manufacturing business has actually declined. So we wanted to bring this up as well because what we're starting to see is a conversation about the whole idea of catfishing that had been discussed by the head of the auto businesses in China. In essence, what he shared with us was that there's this phenomenon happening where there's a ship captain in Norway that found that sardines, when alive upon arrival at port, got higher prices than if they were dead. So he developed a technique where he would drop a catfish inside of that pen, and as those sardines were trying to get away from the catfish, they actually would stay alive until they got to port, and he got a better price for his product. So I bring this up because that was the term used by the Chinese official who manages sort of this space of the government, that they were looking forward to catfishing domestic producers. And on one hand, you hear of bond issues by XPeng and NIO, but on the other hand, actually BYD runs all the ports and runs all the electric buses in Shenzhen, but also other parts of China. This is part of the pollution reduction plan of the government. But they're already seeing sales declines related to Tesla's expansion. I was a little surprised in the case of BYD because BYD occupies, I guess, a bit of the high end, but Xpeng and Neo tended to be sort of high-end SUVs in terms of price. So I was surprised to see that consumers seem to be saying that they're willing to walk away from BYD at a lower price to pay more for a Tesla for everything that Tesla brings. So this sort of catfishing process has already begun for Tesla from what we can see in the case of BYD, and we expect this to be continuing rather dramatically over the next couple of years as the Chinese government gets the shift in buying that they're looking for. As we reviewed, they also have issues with if you have an ICE vehicle, you have alternate days that you're allowed to drive, whereas EVs are allowed to drive any day of the week. There's just all these rules that were very restrictive and forcing people towards EVs. And the pollution impacts reflects where they want to go. So we could see that happening. I suppose the only sort of challenge that lurks here is a number of our viewers have put comments in our section each year discussing the fact that, at one point they're just going to march Elon off, at the airport, march him under military guns off, and he's going to have to leave the country so they can just sort of take over and do whatever they want. I will say that I actually don't think this will happen, especially because Apple and other manufacturing and also their need to sell products into the United States restricts the chance this might happen. But all I got to say is we chose this title because it really fits what the stated goals are of the Chinese government in terms of their pollution and their move to EVs. And they're doing everything they can, including Tesla's access manufacturing facilities there and them funding it to make that happen. And so if you're a shareholder, I think you'll be very happy with where things are going. And so basically, I just think China is huge when it comes to beneficial circumstance for Tesla. We look forward to your comments on this for our China review beat here. Next, we sort of do a little bit of our usual, which is our health tips. Don't forget your 25 leg lifts while seated, putting a 5-pound weight on your leg, lifting it 25 times, and then doing the same thing with the other leg. That came from a PhD from University of Michigan, Dinesh. Also wanted to encourage you to consider the 5-2 or some other diet related to fasting. And that's also 30 SPF or better when it comes to skin cancer. Also recommended no more than once a week fried foods as a way to reduce the chance of type 2 diabetes related to the storage of that food near your organs that occurs because your body doesn't know what to do with it. And then, we'll sort of stick with that based on our larger list for this show. Any rate, by the way, I will continue to add this last one because it's a problem for me, which is eating and going to bed too quickly. One of our docs that we interviewed is a cancer doc at the University of Louisville, and he pointed out that people are a lot more busy now, so they tend to eat and jump in bed quickly. The problem with that is that it takes 4 hours of the food to digest that you've eaten, and while you're sleeping, that food, the acid that digests that food will actually move up into your organs and eventually cause cancer. So he recommends at least a 4-hour period for the food to digest, minimum 2. That way you don't end up with those acids moving up into your upper respiratory area and creating other issues. At any rate, I want to thank you for joining us. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Lehith Road, Hebrew, Hoda Hafez, Farsi, Hey Do, Swedish, Stasvice, Russian, Ni Hao Ma, Chinese, and Assalamu Alaikum, Muslim. And in Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk Goodman. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and we look forward to your comments.